Hey everybody, Sam Haymart with Test Driven TV. Today we're talking about the 2024 Genesis GV60, and this is the high performance model. So we're gonna have a good look at it inside and out. We're gonna take it for a drive, and as usual, I'm gonna tell you what I really think. All right, my friends, before we get out on the drive, as always, I want to talk about what we've got. This is the 2024 Genesis GV60 Performance, essentially the top of the line, the fastest, most luxurious model that they offer. As tested, it's also the most expensive, $71,000 and some change. And it's really hard to spend very much more money here, save for adding a few things if you get to the dealership and really go bonkers, which you should really never do. But that said, this is a beautiful lustrous color, and it has a two-tone paint treatment on it. The body cladding around the wheels and down on the lower rockers is a nice sort of satin silver color that really plays off this shiny crystalline mint quite nicely. Now the design, this is a vehicle that shares its architecture with the Hyundai and the Kia electrics, the EV6 Kia, as well as the Ioniq 5. And so it's sort of in the same size and shape range, but the styling is entirely its own. It is a Genesis through and through. And as we look at the front, you can see that it's got the dual thin strip LED headlights, which are very distinctive to Genesis. And while they might not look like it, they actually work pretty good at night. They have a lot of little elements in there that really light the world up quite nicely. As we come around the corner, 21-inch alloy wheels on this, kind of a nice satin chrome look. And you might say, why do they have to be so big? Well, if you look through them, you'll see that there's some pretty big disc brakes back behind those. This is a heavy car, electrics are. They need that to slow them down. It's just part of the deal. Now, one of the design details that I really do think is pretty slick, if you look at the hood, this is a clamshell hood. It actually wraps down over the fender line, and then you've got some sort of curved, artistic looking cut lines there. Now, it doesn't lift forward like some of the old clamshell hoods do in the past. It does lift open upward toward the back. And when you do so, there's a little bit of a frunk in there. There's not a lot to see in terms of its mechanicals, but there is a little small storage area up there that's just about the right size to throw your portable charger at, but not much else. And part of that's because there is a pretty sizable electric motor at the front. There's also one at the back. Underneath the floor in the middle is a large lithium-ion battery, 77.4 kilowatts, about the size of a queen-size mattress. That's where a lot of that weight comes for this car. One other little detail is these door handles, sort of getting popular with EVs as well as luxury cars today. Flush fitting door handles. When the car is unlocked, they pop out so that you can grab them. When the car is locked, they flush back in. And when you walk up to the car, it senses your key, they pop those open and in you can get. Kind of a nice little detail. Up on the roof is a full fixed panel panoramic roof. It does not open, but it is a large sheet of glass that gives a lot of airiness to the interior, and it is an item that tends to be expected when we're up in this price range. Really where the money's at though, at the rear three-quarter view, is this little detail right here. A little bit of a chrome Z detail and some triangular shapes. This is something that people either love or they hate, but I kind of like it. It really gives some visual interest to what is otherwise a pretty simple design on this car. Built-in spoiler, LED taillights back there, the thin strip design, very much like we see at the front with the headlights. This is a power opening hatch. We, again, expect this when we get into this price range. Opens in a number of different ways. And right here at the back, this is where the charging port is. This is not my favorite location for a charging port. I prefer it to be at the front so that you can drive straight in to your garage, straight into a parking space where there's a charger. I'm not a backer inner. This forces you to back in wherever you're at. Charging times are sort of on the mid to high level because it's a mid to high level battery size. And depending on the charger that you have at home, it's going to be somewhere in the middle of all that. My charger is a pretty slow charger. I have a 24 amp level 2 because I use a dryer outlet in my garage. And so it takes me a little longer than some of those other options there, but it works for me. You know, you plug it in overnight, it's great in the morning. As often it was said on MTV Cribs, this is where the magic happens. Just look at this interior. Along with the exterior and design and the color that we have out there, we have this beautiful kind of creamy white and gray interior that just feels like you're sitting in a cloud. And the design in here is really as futuristic as it gets today. Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, they've all really been pushing the fashion forward look on their cabins, and this is no different. This is fully outfitted with beautiful pattern, genuine aluminum trim. It's cool to the touch. It's hot to the touch when it's hot outside. Soft stitch materials, leatherette dash. The seats themselves here are actually a Napa leather in a beautiful quilted pattern. And all of the soft surfaces, pretty much everywhere your arms and your hands may roam, are either leather or a leatherette. Technology. This has the Genesis corporate dual 12.3-inch cockpit, which is all the rage in the automotive industry right now. And it has a bit of a gentle curve in there, so it sort of wraps around and gives you a little bit of reduction in glare. It is customizable ahead of the driver. It has a number of different screens that you can choose. And over here on the infotainment side, it's also customizable as well. And you might note that I have white backgrounds here. You can flip that to a dark background if the white's just too much for your eyes. But with this interior color I've got here today, I think it's pretty cool. There is also, of course, a head-up display in front of me. As we look around, a couple of things I do want to point out is that the center stack down here is a very simple control panel, and it has hard controls for a number of the quick jumps on the infotainment system, but mostly the HVAC system. Storage in here, pretty impressive. There is a little bin down at the front. The center console up here is a bit of a cantilevered effect. There's space on the floor below it for something like a backpack or a purse. And there's just roller controls here for things like volume. There is a puck in the center here for controlling the infotainment center. And then the gear selector here is a pretty interesting little device. When the vehicle's powered off, it looks like sort of a nice little backlit crystal ball. Very elegant, very high quality, and it's actually really glass. When you turn this on, that rolls over and then turns into your dial gear selector. Now, I'm not a big fan of dial gear selectors, but this is pretty cool. This is pretty slick. It's a nice little gimmick, but a well done one at that. Further back, buttons for a number of other things, the heated and ventilated seats that I'm sitting in, and a number of the drive controls. This does have a nice slot for your phone right here, wireless charger in there. I like the fact that it's easy to get to and the phone slips right in there. Even with my big cover on this phone, it fits in there quite nicely. Console storage in here, not the biggest in the business. It's about the size of 1/2 of a square tissue box. It's square, but it's just not very deep. Big enough for glasses, maybe a wallet, a few little things like that. The glove box, on the other hand, pretty interesting design on this. It's actually a drawer that slides out, and it's pretty big. Nice generous space in there. I just think that's kind of innovative. You don't see that very often. There's another little thing I want to talk about, though, that my husband found when we were driving around. Over here on the left-hand side, there's a little twist knob for the electric mirrors, and you can go left or right, and you can set it. But on the right-hand side, on the passenger side, they have kind of a fake little speaker grill there in that spot. They wanted to keep the look symmetrical, but if you start playing with that and twisting it, oh, look at that. There's some storage inside there for something. And there's actually 2 different spaces in there. You can pull the inner liner out and, whoa, what's this for? I just thought that was very interesting that they put something like this in this car. I guess if you had medications you had to take every day and you just wanted to make sure you had a spare in case you forgot your meds to go to work or something like that, you could always store 2 or 3 in your car, right? The seats are very comfortable, power operated, of course, heated, ventilated, as I mentioned. I have been sitting in these things driving this car all this week. Love it. And I love the fact that this has controls on the steering wheel. It has paddle shifters, which don't control shifting because we don't shift gears in this car, but it does control the regenerative braking power. And you can also set this all the way up to a 1-pedal drive so that it has very strong regenerative braking. You can let off the power pedal and it'll actually bring the car to a stop, sort of like a bumper car. But if you don't want that, you don't have to have that. You can make it drive and feel like pretty much any normal car relative to the braking power. Over my head, as you can see, the large panoramic roof. It's actually a very dark glass, even with this cover open. I'm not getting very much sunlight through it. Not a bad thing. Here in the summer in Arizona, I don't want to get baked to death. The back seat of the GV60 is actually a pretty nice, comfortable place for the most part. As you can see, I've got plenty of space back here. These seats are set for my height, about 5'8" with my tennis shoes on, and I've got about 4 to 5 inches of space ahead of my knees, which means taller people could be sitting up front and I would still not feel cramped back here. The one thing I will say is that the seating position feels a little bit on the low side, even though we are in a pretty tall crossover SUV, and part of that is because the aforementioned battery has to fit under the floor, and so the floor is a little bit higher, so it feels a little bit more like a sedan back here, and the seat isn't exactly full of a lot of contour. Let's just put it like that. There's not a lot of holding you. So it's a little bit flat and it's a little bit low, but it's otherwise comfortable with this beautiful leather. And there are quite a few amenities back here to keep us comfortable. First of all, there's storage. What it doesn't have in that center console bin, it makes up down below, and you can kind of see through there a little bit. There's some open air space, but there's room for you to throw some things in there that maybe you don't need to get to all the time, or for your backseat passengers, power ports as well. And usually I always like to see vents back here. They're not on the back of the console, but they are on the side of the door post, as you can see there. Kind of nice little location, and it really gets it a little bit closer up towards your face, which is nice when it's blazing hot like I can get here in Arizona. Now, the seat does fold down as you would expect in a crossover SUV, giving a nice big cargo space back there in the back. This is an interior that I absolutely love. I loved it the first time I tested this car 2 years ago. Completely different color scheme back then, but this just works. It fits with the exterior of the car and it just all goes together. The quality is some of the best in the business. Basically, this is almost as good as it gets relative to interior quality. We're really right up there with Mercedes-Benz in terms of quality, the switchgear, the fit and finish. Maybe not quite as glitzy and glammy as Mercedes-Benz can get. Lexus used to have some of the better interiors in the business, but they've been sort of faltering the last few years, last few product cycles of things. And so this is right up there with Mercedes-Benz. This interior gets 5 out of 5 stars. The infotainment system here is the top of the line from Hyundai, Genesis, Kia. It has a number of great features to it. Obviously, graphics and ease of use. The graphics on this one being we're in a luxury car, it's got some like simulated wood and white background, but as I mentioned, you can change that. The plus point is the fact that this is just very classy to look at. It's very easy to use. There's not very much of a learning curve. This has Bang & Olufsen audio, which is phenomenal, and Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Notably though, this is not wireless here, not yet. You do have to plug it in to use either of those, but you can feed audio and streaming through Bluetooth if you just don't need the Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. This does have a 360-degree monitor, which absolutely is amazing with the different views that it has. This is just an all-in-one solution that doesn't really depend on the cloud and subscription services for most of its content. You don't have to, like Toyota or Lexus, spend up to get all of the things that makes it good. It just works, it looks good, and there's so much content in here that I'm just not even going to spend time going through it today. It's there, it's one of the best in the business. This system gets 5 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, finally time to take a drive, and if you watch my videos, you know the question I always like to ask is, how does it go? So we're going to come to a complete stop. We're going to turn the boost button on and go. Woo! Oh my God. And 60. Woo! So all 4 tires there making a little bit of scratch as we took off. Power is instantaneous, and that's what you step up to this particular trim grade for. Instantaneous power. That's what you want. And it comes on strong. Nice shiftless power, and it throws you back in your seat. When it comes to electric cars, really, you know, there's no transmission to talk about. Does it shift well? Does it not shift well? Doesn't matter. There's no transmission. It's just seamless power. That's one of the things I love about driving an electric car, is you don't have to deal with a lot of the issues that befuddle engineers trying to make a conventional car with transmissions appealing to drive. This just works. This just works. So what do you measure an electric car by besides its power? Well, first of all, let's talk about that. 483 horsepower, 516 pound-feet of torque is what we've got between the 2 motors and the battery here. And that is afforded by that boost button that allows max power output for up to 10 seconds, allows you to burn through the battery super fast. And so that's kind of just a nice little gimmick. They could just have it like that all the time, but nonetheless, they give you some feeling like you're playing a game and having fun. And I like that. It's playful. So one of the things that I do like to talk about when it comes to electric cars, of course, is range. And range on this one, according to the EPA, is 235 miles, which on the surface of it isn't that much because, you know, electric cars now, it's kind of expected that we're going to be in the 300-mile range in most cases. And actually most of them are now that are up in this price range. But when you step up to the high performance versions such as this one, well, just like a gas car, you're going to use more fuel faster when you have more horsepower, and so therefore we have less range. But in my week with it, I found that it's actually a lot more efficient than it portrays, and sometimes that is the case with electric cars, provided that I don't use a lot of the power takers like air conditioning or drive it at night a lot with the lights. When I've fully charged this vehicle, I've seen 285 miles total range, and right now I've been driving it all day during our video shoot, and I'm still at 257 range that's available. So the range is actually impressively good given the level of horsepower that this vehicle has. And it's showing me about 3 miles per kilowatt hour on the meter over here, which is good, especially for a larger vehicle like this with power. So I'm happy with this powertrain. It's powerful, it's efficient, and of course it has the I-pedal, one-pedal driving, which I usually have it set on. You lift off the power pedal and it's like stepping on the brakes. And that really helps the regenerative braking and helps extend your range. So this powertrain, very impressive to me. I like it. It gets 5 out of 5 stars. Now for the conversation about ride, drive, and handling. One of the things that always comes to me when we have an electric car is how does it ride? Because they're heavy. This car weighs almost 5,000 pounds. And so whenever you have a heavy vehicle, like think about a 3/4 ton or a 1-ton pickup truck that weighs 5,000 pounds. How do they usually ride? Stiff. Why? Because they have to hold that weight and control it. And so electric vehicles tend to ride like trucks often because they have to be sprung in such a way that they can handle all that weight and still make it handle and corner and do all the things we expect a car to do. The trade-off is the fact that once you do that, once you stiffen up the suspension to that point, the ride just doesn't, it's not always that good. So what most higher end electric cars have is an adaptive suspension in some way. Mercedes-Benz tends to love their air suspensions. A lot of other manufacturers go a little bit less expensive and have adaptive dampers, which is what they've done here. This has adaptive dampers that can go stiff and soft. They can go back and forth. They can adjust to the needs of what you're doing to the drive modes. And that helps take some of the bouncy ride out of the equation here that a lot of electric cars have. And so while this is stiffly sprung, the damper settings allow this to have a forgiving ride when we're around town going over speed bumps, speed humps, manhole covers, and things like that. And so this tends to have a little bit better ride than some of the other models of this car without that suspension do. So that's a good thing. And it reads the road with radar, so it can predict the bumps coming at you and then adjust as it's hitting them as opposed to reacting to them, which is pretty cool as well. So what do I think? The reality is that while this does have a lot of countermeasures to keep it from having a stiff, bouncy ride, it still does at times. And that might be partially because of the settings, this being a high performance version. But I do find that driving around town, I still get a little bit of a bounciness. In fact, I've turned off the head-up display because it bouncing up and down going down the street kind of makes me car sick. So it still has that to an extent. They could have spent a little bit more time eliminating that. So while a lot of work has been done to make this a better handling, better riding electric vehicle, there's still a little bit of work to do. This chassis gets 4 out of 5 stars. Now it's time to have a conversation about value. Is it worth the money? That's always the question I like to ask, because no matter how nice a car is, how fun it is to drive, maybe how good it looks, what the interior is like, is it worth the money? Well, we are at $71,000 and some change. This is essentially the most you can spend on this car. There are other models in the lineup that are quite a bit less money, but looking at the top range model here, performance, all the luxury inside, and all of the goodness that we talked about, I look at things like warranty coverage. That's one thing. Now, warranty coverage on a Genesis, literally one of the best warranties in the business. 10 years, 100,000 miles powertrain, same for the battery and electrics. 5 years, 60,000 miles bumper to bumper. It's hard to beat that anywhere on the planet, really, when it comes to new cars. They do it the best. But when I look at pricing here and is it worth the money, we're in a different climate than we were 2 years ago when I tested this car before. 2 years ago, this car was identical to what it is today. They haven't changed it really at all. What has changed is the business climate that we're in now for electric cars. We are no longer in the middle of a pandemic. You can get one of these on a dealer lot. They're sitting around, and that is really to be said for almost all EVs right now. They've caught up with demand, and now demand is falling below actual what's out there. And there's a lot more models from different brands on the market now competing for that dollar. So we're having price wars at the moment. So long story short, $71,000 is no longer a 5-star value like it was 2 years ago when I tested it. I put it at 4 because really I think where we're at with all of the rebates and the slashing of prices going on, this is a car that you should be able to get for $60,000 to $65,000 in a comparative sense. Almost anything that you can compare it to, that's kind of where it's going. So I'm going to lower value score just a little bit, but don't worry, we're still in very good stead here. We have a total review score of 4.6 stars, which is phenomenal. This is an excellent example of EV engineering, quality, luxury, design, appeal, all of that. It just needs to come down a little bit in price. That's all, but very nice. So there you go, the Genesis GV60 Performance. If you like what we do, please subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there. Better yet, you can just see our latest video right there and then subscribe. Either way, stay tuned.